Slog FPV. Over the Labor Day holiday here in the US, there were some pretty good discounts going on as far as sales. So I heard a lot of good things about the Happymodel Larva X. So I picked one up, the TBS Crossfire version. So this is my review of the product with some setup tips, with some changes that I made out of the box that will improve the quad. But before I go into that, why don't we go ahead and go through the specs. The wheelbase is 100 millimeters motor post to motor post. The weight is 56 grams. I'll flash it up here above without the battery. If you look at the weight with the battery, with the recommended 300 mAh 3S battery, it comes in at 80 grams. And with the recommended 450 2S battery, it comes in at 84 grams. As far as the motors, they're the Happymodel 1103 7000 kV motors. The flight controller is the Crazy Bee F4 FR Pro V3. This is their third version. The ESCs on this are 10 amp continuous and support BL Heli S, and also it supports D-Shot 600. The camera on this is one of my favorite cameras. It's the RunCam Nano. It does have an adjustable camera angle, as you can see, which is nice. The VTX is switchable between 25 milliwatts and 200 milliwatts. The thing that's really cool about this quad is it does have a built-in DVR. You can kind of see it here where the SD card plugs in right there. As far as smart audio, it does support that, so you can change the bands and channels and the power output via your OSD. And again, for the receiver, I purchased it with the TBS Crossfire version. So overall, I'm pretty impressed with the specs and the price of this. Even without a discount, you get its list for $114.99 without any coupons. So I think that's a pretty competitive price given the capability and features of this thing. But I'm sure you can pick it up and just watch for sales and coupons on it to get a better price. So I'm going to go ahead and go over what's in the box that you get. You get some props. They're different than the Avon 2.5 props. You get an Allen wrench. You get some spare screws here. It's nice that they give you an extra canopy. Again, you get the Allen wrench there and a screwdriver. Kind of see the screwdriver there. So it's a pretty complete kit, except it doesn't come with a battery charger. The instructions actually are pretty good, so you can read through those. So next what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this thing up in Betaflight and try to keep everything as stock as possible except for my rates and mode switches. I just have a standard way of setting things up. And I'm going to fly this thing for a week and get back to you on my thoughts on how it flies. I wanted to show you what can happen when you do crash the Larva X before I fix this. I was doing some barrel rolls. I just loaded Betaflight 4.1, so I was testing things out, and I mean, it was a fairly hard crash, but you know, it wasn't into a fence post or anything like that. I just hit the ground, but I think that is an issue with the Larva X design here. The canopy is pretty thin, and that's what actually gives it rigidity. But when you hit the canopy, you can see it cracked it here, broke the other side here. Since I was replacing the canopy, I went ahead and put in a Luminaire AXE shorty. Fits in there. You can see it's a UFL connector. So I went ahead and did that so it matches up better with the Crossfire Nano that I have on here. I also set up the Crossfire RSSI in the OSD. I'll go ahead and show you quickly when I go through the setup tips on how to do that. And so I wanted to show you this before I took it out, and hopefully I won't crash it this time, but definitely would recommend get additional canopies. So this isn't a full tutorial on how to set up a quad from scratch. This is just what I did as far as changes from the factory settings. So I am running Betaflight 4.1.0. I was having quite a bit of prop wash, so I thought I would try that, and it improved it significantly. So I think it flies much better, even with the default Betaflight settings on 4.1 over 4.04 in the factory settings. So going through the tabs, I would recommend that you calibrate your accelerometer, and you just put it on a level surface and hit calibrate. I've already done that. Moving on to the ports tab, I didn't do anything here. It was already set up correctly from the factory with smart audio setting there. Moving on to the configuration tab, I did make a couple of changes here. First, it was set up correctly with Crossfire, but one thing that wasn't turned on was telemetry information, and that's something that's nice to have on your radio. In this case, I have a Taranis X9D Plus. So I also turned on the D-Shot beacon for RX lost and RX set, so that you can basically buzz the motors to find the model. I did turn off USB, but that was the only other changes that I did on this tab. Moving on to power and battery, I did increase the maximum cell voltage to 4.4 from 4.3. I normally don't, do high voltage on my high voltage batteries, but in case I want to, I went ahead and increased that. This is the PID tuning page here. If you'll notice, it's significantly different in the 4.1 Betaflight configurator. You have these sliders here. I just left it at stock, as well as the filter settings. I just left as stock. The only thing that I did change is these are my rate profiles, and I have a switch that I switch between my different rate profiles, and this is my freestyle rates. Moving on to the receiver tab, I did change the channel map to AETR1234 because it wasn't set correctly for my radio. As far as the RSSI channel, it was set up for aux 8, and I'll show you how to set up your Crossfire Nano receiver with Lua script and run that from my Taranis. I'll show you that in a second here. So those are the changes. It was only the channel map on this tab. Modes, this is just my standard mode settings. I have ARM on aux2. My mode is actually mode switch is aux1, and I do, like I said, have a beeper set up on aux3, and I do have air mode set on a switch, and then flip over after crash. I also that's on aux3. So those are the modes that I have. And enabling expert mode, I do have aux4 as a rate switch for 3 different rates. Moving on to the OSD, I didn't make any changes here. It was set up fairly nicely, and it had RSSI already enabled, so I just left that alone. Moving on to the CLI, the changes I made here, if you look at my VTX settings, one thing I think that's important to note is I changed the VTX low power disarm to on. and that way, you know, you're not going to burn up your VTX. So I always set that to on all my models. So I would highly recommend you do the same. So with that, I'll go ahead and show you how to set up the TBS Nano receiver for RSSI showing up in your OSD. So I'll quickly go through how to set up the Crossfire Nano with RSSI. First thing you need to do is turn on your radio controller, and then also your model. You need to make sure that they're bound with the green light here. Then you're going to push the menu button until you get to this page, and then you're going to page once, and then you're going to go down to the Crossfire folder, and you're going to hit enter. And then, oops, let me go back there, hit enter. And then you're going to scroll down to Crossfire Lua script here. You're going to hit enter and then execute. Then you're going to scroll down to Crossfire Nano, hit enter. It'll populate the screen. You'll notice that you don't need to go to 12 channel. You can leave it at 8 channel, which you get less degradation with 8 than 12. So then what you're going to want to do is you're going to scroll down to the channel mapping, go down to channel 12 here, and you're going to change that to link quality. I've already done that. So when you hit enter, the selection choices that you have is RSSI and link quality, and then you also have RSSI. The correct one is really link quality. That isn't signal strength, it's really a measurement of, you know, number of packet loss essentially. So I think that's probably the best one. Most everybody recommends just using link quality for RSSI. And that's it. It's pretty simple to do. And you're really not using a channel to do this, because the TBS Nano receiver is actually communicating directly to the flight controller itself. It's not really using a channel to broadcast the RSSI value. It's directly connected to the flight controller, so it takes it directly without actually using a channel. So with that, that's the end of what changes I made for the TBS Crossfire version of the Larva X. So here are my final thoughts on the Happymodel Larva X. The highlights: with Betaflight 4.1 loaded on it, I had release candidate 5 on it, and just the stock PIDs, I think it flies great. I think one of the goals that Betaflight devs had for 4.1 is that quad should fly reasonably well with just the default PIDs, and I think they accomplished that goal with the Larva X. It flies better, much better than the 4.04 in factory tune that it had on it. Another highlight: the flight times are reasonable, as you get about 5 minutes on it with 450 mAh 2S batteries, and about 3 minutes on the 300 mAh 3S batteries, just doing a light park freestyle. I do think it does fly better on 3S, so that's what I would recommend that you fly this thing with. Another highlight: I do like the built-in DVR, but it did have some quirks to it. I was occasionally getting some freeze frames, and then another caution is you need to stop the recording before you unplug the battery, or you'll lose the file on the SD card. I do like the camera on this thing. The RunCam Nano is one of my favorite cameras. And then also I think the VTX performance is good. And then lastly, I think it's a good value for the money. So as far as concerns with the Larva X, I think the Achilles heel of this quad is the canopy itself. Even in what I consider a light crash, the canopy can crack, and I'll show you a picture of it here. The issue I have is the canopy provides the structural integrity for the flight stack itself, and because it's so thin, it does crack, and then you can dislodge the flight stack off the rubber isolators here. The frame itself, I think, is very sturdy, but I personally don't like the design as it gets hung up in trees pretty easily. I do prefer the regular toothpick X style type frame, as it's a lot easier to dislodge them if they get hung up in a tree. The other con, I think, of this thing is it doesn't fly very well out of the box. At least it didn't for me, and I'm at higher altitude. I think it does have excessive prop wash with the tune that it had. Another con is I don't like the battery strap. It's pretty hard to cinch down the battery, so I definitely recommend putting in a different battery pad like I've done here. Lastly, it would have been nice if they would have supplied antenna tubes for the Crossfire version, which would accommodate the antennas, because you have to kind of figure out how you're going to mount the antennas on this thing. So in conclusion, I do give the Larva X thumbs up with the caveats mentioned. Is it the best toothpick twig quad out there? For me, the answer is no. Is it worth the money? I definitely think I would say yes. I will be doing a best of toothpick twig class video on the bind and flies I have after I review one more quad that I just picked up. I think that overall the bind and flies have improved significantly over the past year, and there's really not too many really horrible ones out there anymore. I would recommend that you watch several reviews on this quad. Not everybody is looking for the same thing. For me, I like smooth flying quads. Other people like little rippers, and I think this one definitely is a little ripper. So with that, I will show you a quick DVR video. And as always, thanks for watching.